this week's episode of Assassination Classroom, Karma Akabane and Gakushu Asano do battle in the Cube of Death, and Principal Asano proves yet again that he's the most dastardly villain from the entire series, and he doesn't even need a creepy skull face to pull it off. Let me be blunt with you guys. My worst subject when I was in school was math. So this week's episode, of course, opened up with this extreme math problem that both Karma and Gakushu are trying to solve with all of their might. With Karma eventually finding the answer, realizing that it's right there in front of his face, and Gakushu completely overthinking this, and this results in Class 3E actually breaking into the top 50. And I love how they actually realize that in this episode, because after this incredibly tense test scene, Koro Sensei decides he's going to reveal the scores to all of the students, and when they realize that Terasaka is number 46, they realize, yep, we did it, we made it, because Terasaka is kind of an idiot. Actually, who am I kidding? Terasaka is like one of my favorite characters from the series, and he was pretty awesome in this week's episode as well. But this week's episode of Assassination Classroom can be divided up into two very distinct chunks, with the first half of the episode being all about the test, the second half of the episode all about Principal Asano and his plan to bring down Class 3E and Koro Sensei, and he does so with some pretty extreme ballistics. First, let me just say, Principal Asano's reaction to his son actually not coming in first in the big exams is a little over the top and extreme, especially how he appears out of nowhere like a freaking ninja in front of all of the students, and then just backhands the shit out of his son, sending him flying into a wall. However, this isn't going to diminish Gakushu's hatred for his father. In fact, it's really only intensified in this episode. I especially love the jab when he says that this is actually the first time that he's seen him be a father figure. Everyone completely freaked out by this decides to leave the classroom, and that's when Principal Asano decides he has to do something very extreme. So, the next day in class, out of nowhere, the entire Class 3E building is about to be demolished by all of this heavy equipment, and they don't even, try to ask the students or the teachers to leave the building. No, they just come in with this big backhoe and start destroying the walls. You see, Principal Asano has this crazy plan where he's going to destroy the old 3E building, and he's going to transfer them all to this experimental school building, which is basically a glorified prison. And this is going to be a part of his brand new lesson plan to extend his educational empire. And he's going to do that by killing Koro Sensei. And what he's done is he's threatened to actually fire him unless he goes through these tests, where he's going to have to look through these multiple school books, which all have these anti-Koro Sensei grenades in them. And basically, after a couple of times of doing this, Koro Sensei should supposedly be blown away. In fact, the very first time he actually tries this, he only gets to read the question for a split second before this grenade ends up going off in his face and practically just rendering and completely destroying him. Principal Asano really seems to be enjoying this, and he's made this work completely in his favor, and I can't wait to see what the twist is actually going to be here. Is Koro Sensei going to be able to survive? Does he have another trump card? Is he actually going to be able to solve the problems before the grenades go off? Is he somehow going to end up turning this on Principal Asano, which I actually have a feeling that's probably going to end up happening. This is going to be a big moment for the character of Principal Asano, who, like I said, despite the fact that he's not really an assassin himself, he doesn't have a creepy skull face or some weird crazy assassin abilities, he's still definitely one of the most dastardly beings from this series. So, what's the rundown on this week's episode of Ass Class? This one was really exciting because it focused a lot more on Principal Asano, who is just such an amazing villain to watch. You just love to hate this guy. By the end of the episode, he's one of the most hated characters from the entire series, especially with his incredibly cheap plan to get rid of Koro Sensei, basically saying if you don't do this, you're going to get fired. And for some odd reason, that really freaks out Koro Sensei. Call this another one of his weaknesses. But I'm actually glad that they're focusing more on the rivalry between Principal Asano and Koro Sensei as well, because they have very differing ideologies, and seeing them go at each other like this is always really interesting, because not every single problem in the series can be solved with assassination or some big fight scene. Sometimes you gotta use your brain, and that's one of the biggest things about this show right here. The first first half of the episode is basically just more of the same. They take a test and they personify it in a really interesting way, with both Karma and Gakushu being stuck in this massive cube, shooting at these weird one-eyeballed creatures while trying to solve this problem, and Karma just figures it out instantly. A lot of this has to do with the fact that he's been reflecting on the fact that all of his friends have basically found their second blade. They found their niche. And he himself never really got there quite yet. He just sort of viewed people on the surface. However, when he realized he was one-to-one with all of them, that's when he ended up solving the problem and realizing that the answer was basically right in front of him the entire time. Gakushu, on the other hand, was definitely the mayor of Strugglesville during this scene, and he ended up paying the ultimate price by not being number one and ended up getting bitch-slapped by his dad, who is so just... God, he's a great villain. I love this guy. He's definitely one of the most over-the-top, ridiculous villains I've seen in just about any other anime series. And his methods of doing things are just so intense. Like, there was no reason to bring in that heavy destruction equipment and immediately start tearing down the school. It's so over-the-top and funny. But honestly, that's one of the reasons to check out this show. It's enduring characters, it's ridiculous plot lines, and I can't wait to see where it is going to go from here. It looks like they're going to be wrapping up this whole Principal Asano thing probably in the next couple of episodes, and then right after that, we're kind of at the midway point of the second season, so we're probably going to finally start getting into some Koro Sensei backstory and learning a little bit more about him, where he came from, and where the hell he's going, because he still plans on destroying the planet. At least that's what I think is still going on, unless, of course, his students can end up taking him out. We're just going to have to wait and see how that's going to play out. On the technical side of things, this was another pretty good-looking episode. Some great imagery at the beginning to show how intense the test actually is. And the final scenes with the grenades and Koro Sensei were also just really, really tense. So, can't wait to see what they're going to do from here. This was a fantastic episode of Assassination Classroom, one that all fans of the series should definitely check out, and it's an episode that really plays to the strengths of the series. This episode right here is exactly why this show is so loved by people, because it's a school setting, but it's also something just completely different all at the same time. So I'm going to give this week's episode right here, that's right, a 5 out of 5, a fantastic episode of Ass Class. Check it out, Ass Class fans. You might see something you like. But if you did watch this week's episode, why don't you tell me what you thought about it? You can tell me in the comments section below. And what do you want to see from the final season of Assassination Classroom? You guys are awesome. Thank you for watching this review. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, share it with all of your friends, and you guys can also check us out on social media. All that stuff will be in the description box below. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby!